Hi everybody, it's Kathy Drew again from Gina's Bernina Sewing Center. So a good friend of mine, Gail Harvey, asked if I would do a video showing how I make my miniature piping with Bernina's number 23 presser foot. So the number 23 presser foot is actually an applique foot, but we can do a lot of other things with that foot as well. So not only am I going to show you the piping, but we're going to do a little bit of couching, and then we're going to do some blind applique. So let's take a look at the presser foot so you can familiarize yourself with it. It is a clear foot so that you have good visibility. And I really want to show you the bottom of the presser foot because I think that's one of the most important things about this foot for what we're going to be using it for. So let me see if I can get this in here to where you can see. Oh, that's perfect. That's a great view. So this is the front of the foot down here. And what you can see is there is a little channel out of the bottom of the foot, which is perfect to hold any of these small cords or twims like we're going to make our piping out of. Hold them in place for us. And also it's a great foot to do this with because lots of times when you're putting on piping or you're appliquing with this foot, you have to go around curves. So this part that has been removed or channeled out of the bottom of the foot, if you'll notice, it goes back at an angle on each side rather than straight back. And what that does for you is it allows thicknesses to feed under the foot, not only when you're sewing straight, but when you're going around a curve. So this is an excellent foot for lots of different uses. And I'm going to start off showing Gail how to do her miniature piping with this foot. Now I'm going to leave the red thread on simply because I want you to see the stitching. And what I'm going to be doing is I am using a product, we've used it for years at the store. It's called Speed Crocheting, and that's what we make our piping out of. You, of course, can use whatever works best for you. There is another one I think that's made of rayon, but lots of people have their favorite things that they use. But we're going to be making tiny, tiny piping today, and so this is our speed crocheting that we use quite often. Now, I'm going to show you a piece that I've already stitched because we're going to be covering our cord with our own fabric. Now, why would I use this foot instead of a zipper foot? One of the reasons I love this foot is that during the stitching, the foot is holding and forming the fabric around the round cord. Now, lots of times when you make piping with your basic zipper feet, you may notice that the top layer of fabric and the bottom layer of fabric shift a little, and you get what looks like little pleats along your piping, and you're wondering what's happening. That's because your piping foot is butted up against the cording, and that allows the fabrics to shift when you're doing your stitching, and then you get that little pleated effect, or maybe wrinkles would be the better word to use for it. But when you have a presser foot that firmly fits around the trim that you're working with or the piping cord that you're using, it holds that fabric securely around that cord, and it does not allow it to shift at different speeds, the top layer and the bottom layer. But when I stitch my fabric to my cording, I don't stitch as close to the cord as I can get. I stitch away from that cord, and I hope maybe you can see, but I could actually probably get my finger between the cord and the stitching. And I do that so when I do the final run of stitching, when I'm attaching it, I will stitch as close to the cord as I can get, and that will hide all these construction threads in my seam, and they won't be visible to the eye. So let's make our piping. I have got a piece of, I think it's batiste, I'm not sure. And here's my speed crocheting. Now, if your piping is going to be straight, it's not going to be shaped in a curve, you can cut it on the grain. But if you are going to shape your piping around a curved area, then you will have to cut the fabric that you're going to create your piping from on the bias. So always remember to do that. You don't get a good effect. So I've positioned, this fabric really doesn't have a right or a wrong side, but if your fabric did, you would position your speed crocheting on the wrong side and then just fold your fabric over. Now I'm going to take my fingernail and just push that piping cord into the fold and position that cord in that little channeled out area in the front of the presser foot. Now I have got stitch number 1 selected, and I'm going to move my needle position further away from the piping cord. I don't want to stitch this run right up against the piping cord, so I'm going to say maybe 4 positions to the right of the center. You could probably do less than that, but depending on what fabric weight you're using. And then ever so often I just take my finger and push that piping cord into the fold of my fabric, and that little channel in the front of the foot is going to securely hold that fabric and shape it around that cord, and I will not have any of those little wrinkles or pleats on my cord. Okay. And that's how simple it is with this foot to cover your cord with your piping, with your fabric rather. All right, so you can see that I've got it all done. And now we're going to insert it into a piece of fabric. We'll do a straight edge first. So now I'm going to position the fabric right side up, fabric I'm attaching it to, and make sure you've got the cut edges of your piping fabric against the cut edge of the material you're attaching it to. And I'm not going to move my needle position. I'm going to allow it to stitch in exactly the same place as it did earlier, because this is not my final run of stitching. All right, so we got our first run. Now we'll take our second piece of fabric, place them right sides together now, and I'm going to flip my fabric over so I can see my last run of stitching. Position the cord underneath the channel in the front of the foot. This time I'm going to move my needle position over as close to the cord as I can get it. And you will see that your stitching is actually going to be to the left of that previous run of stitching that you see here. And now let's check it out and see how pretty it looks. Oh wow, isn't that pretty? And nice and tiny, so sweet. Not a difficult thing to do if you have the right presser foot and the right tools. Hope you like that, Gail. All right, now let's do it on a curve. Now whenever I'm stitching anything on a curve like this, and sometimes just when I'm sewing around a curve, I sometimes shorten my stitch length a little bit to make it a little bit easier for me to go around that curve. So your default setting on your Bernina for a straight stitch is 2.5. So I'm going to take mine down to about 2. And that will make it a little bit easier for me to go around that curve. At intervals in the piping, you can actually cut you some snips if you like. And that will also help it to shape around that curve. All right, we're ready to go. Once again, we're going to move that needle position to where it's away from the piping. We don't want this to be as close as we normally would stitch on our final run. So I've got my needle position about 4 needle positions to the right of center. And then I just keep my edges of my piping along the edge of my fabric. that I'm attaching it to, and then we're going to go around the circle. And just having that little bit of a shorter stitch length really helps you go around that curve. All right, we've got this piece done. Now we're going to position them right sides together. Up, right sides together, and turn it over so that I can see my original line of stitching. This time we will move our needle position much closer to our piping, and that will hide all those construction stitches in our seam allowance. See how that stitching is to the left? The stitching that we're applying now is to the left of the original line of stitching, and that puts it really close to your piping. And whenever I have, let me get a better pair of scissors. These don't want to cut really good for me at the ends. Let me see what I've got over here. A ton of them, I'm sure. Here we go. We'll just use these. These will be great. I always trim my seam allowances down really small. This is very helpful on a curve. You can trim them down so small that you really won't even have to do any clipping to make your fabric turn that curve. So I'm trimming that seam allowance away. It's not going anywhere. You got a lot of stitching lines in there. And let's turn it. And beautiful. Perfect. Look how pretty that piping is. People will be astounded when you do piping like this. It's so pretty. I love the miniature piping. I've never been a big fan of the really big piping in garment construction. And this is just a little accent of color. It's all you need. Now, keeping that in mind, you can also couch down some cords with that as well. I've got a couple of samples to show you. I have attached this cord along the finished edge. I folded this fabric, so if you have a finished edge, this is just rat tail, and I attached it on the edge with a zigzag. And then if you wanted to just use it as an embellishment, I've zigzagged it down through the center. And this little guy is soutache. And whenever you work with soutache, it's like two cords that are joined together with rayon thread, and there is a ditch between those two cords, and you are supposed to stitch directly in that ditch. So I use a number 23 foot to hold that so that I can stitch right in the ditch. So let's give that a try. Very simple. Straight stitch again. Let me put my needle back in center. And if your needle doesn't hit exactly in the center, don't forget about those needle positions. You can definitely move them. All right, I've got my straight stitch, and I might put it back on the default stitch length this time just to make sure that we're going to hit it. And here we go. This is how easy it is. And you can curve this if you need to because of how the foot is channeled out in the bottom. It allows for the thickness of the cord to feed underneath the foot. And it will also allow you to actually shape things in a curve as well. So your soutache, you can shape it as well. Attach the soutache. Isn't that pretty? And then we're going to put the rat tail on the finished edge. Once again, the rat tail is going to go in the channel in the front of the foot. And I'm going to move the needle position over with a zigzag stitch this time. Now you want the zigzag stitch to be wide enough to cover the cord, but you also want to move your needle position so that the left swing of the needle is going to pierce your fabric. And that's what's going to hold your rat tail to the edge. Let's see here, how long? I think I'll widen my stitch width up probably to about 5. Let's see how that looks. Oh yeah, that looks good. That looks great. So, and then we just run it through, keeping the rat tail in the channel in the front of the foot, and there again, if you needed to shape this around a curve, that would definitely not be a problem. Look how pretty that looks and how easy that was. Very easy to do. Now, a lot of people love to use it for applique, and so let me show you a little bit about what you can do with that. If you want to have more of a blind applique effect, I use stitch number 3, which is actually our overlock stitch, and I like to make it very narrow in width and a little bit shorter in length, and use it to do applique. And what you achieve with that is you'll get little straight stitches along the outer edge down into your background fabric, and then it's going to take one stitch after, or one zigzag into the fabric, and I think it's 3 straight stitches and 1 zigzag. 3 straight stitches and 1 zigzag. And that is for a blind applique. Now, I've seen a lot of people that use their blind hem stitch. Your blind hem stitch has 5 straight stitches between each zigzag, and for me that's just a little bit too much distance, so I like to keep it a little bit closer together. Always run a test sample to make sure that your needle is going to hit on that right swing into your background fabric. And then we're going to take, there we go, 1, 2, 3, it is 3, 1, 2, 3, and a zigzag. And that channel in the front of your foot, this is a folded edge, so this is giving you the effect of blind applique or needle turn applique. And this folded edge fits perfectly and snugs up against the right side of that channel and doesn't allow it to shift out of place. Now, there are a lot of people that like to use this for satin stitch applique when they want to use a really tiny satin stitch in their applique. I can't talk and do this at the same time, so let me put my needle down and turn. And when we get turned around this corner, what we'll do is we will do a little bit of satin stitch applique as well. All right, there we go. All right, I'm going to go into my quilt program of stitches, and I am going to select stitch, I think it's 1354, and that is a very tiny satin stitch. And I'm going to test it here, and it fits perfectly. It really gives you a beautiful little edge. It's preset, so it's 1354. And with this foot, it will hold that edge down nice and smooth and flat for you, and allow you to cover that edge, whether it's a raw edge or this. A lot of people love using this presser foot for their satin stitch applique as well. And I'm not going to make you sit and watch me go all the way around, but I do want to zoom in on this and let you see how the stitching looks on both pieces. All right, let's zoom in just a little. Maybe you can see. All right, I don't want to get too close to where it makes it blurry for you, but you can hardly even see the stitching for the blind applique. Look at that. Isn't that pretty? Of course, it's the same color of thread, but because we made it very tiny, it creates really beautiful stitch on those times when you really don't want the stitch to take over. And then here's our satin stitch. Look how beautiful that is. This is a fabulous foot, everybody. I would never be without this presser foot. I use it for so many other things as well. But I hope the things I showed you today will help you, if you already have this foot, learn how to use it to its fullest. A lot of Bernina's presser feet can be used for many other things besides what they were designed for. It just takes crazy women like us to come up with them. And guys too. I shouldn't say just women. So listen, hey, thanks so much. I appreciate you being with me again. And if you have any questions, you can reach us at 865-966-5941. That's Gina's Bernina Sewing Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. And you can also email us at info@ginasbernina.com. And please, visit your local dealer to pick up this presser foot for yourself. And don't forget to like and share. I really would appreciate if you would do that, like and share our post for us. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you again soon. Thank you so much for being with me. Bye-bye now.